Hey, Dooberteers, welcome back to the show. I'm really excited today because we're going to dive into education and farm sanctuaries. And our guest is somebody who's really exciting and intriguing and once drove a pig more than 2,000 miles to get veterinary care. So somebody that's very dedicated and passionate about animals. So Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, great. So tell us a little bit about who you are and tell us about LEAP.
Yeah, so my name's Danielle Hanosh. I live in Northern California, and I was a middle school teacher for about a decade. My background's in education, formally, my schooling. And when I was in my 20s, I went down a rabbit hole of learning where my food came from and how animals were treated, and ended up, while teaching, founding a farm animal sanctuary, which I still live out here in Colfax. It's Blackberry Creek Farm Animal Sanctuary here in California. And would have my students come and volunteer a lot, and just a way for them. They were more in the city, a way for them to get outside, be around nature, something that many of them hadn't had a chance to do. And then I soon really started connecting the educational value of what they were learning, not only practically in taking care of animals, but the social emotional component, the responsibility leadership component, all of those things. And so after COVID, I partnered with two other sanctuaries and we founded LEAP, which is my current nonprofit. It's an educational program. It's a variety of programs, actually, but we run it right now at sanctuaries across the country and just starting to expand it into schools where students, primarily we started with high school students and now we're down all the way to fourth graders. So we went backwards, and students can come learn hands-on outdoors with the animals in a rescue setting. And LEAP stands for Leaders for Ethics, Animals, and the Planet. So we do a lot with climate. We do a lot with ethics, ethical dilemmas. They learn about debate skills, public speaking, leadership, and then, of course, animal welfare and conservation across farmed and domestic and wild animals.
Wow, like you just said a lot. There's so many things about this that I love.
Thank you.
I'm curious, just for people to understand, how many sanctuaries like this are, because you mentioned that it's at sanctuaries, but any idea how many farm sanctuaries are across the country?
How many exist? I have no idea. Hundreds and hundreds.
Okay.
How we have about 22 right now that are regular partners, meaning they either run the summer camp. We have a summer camp version, which is like a 1 week long program, and it's day camp. They don't spend the night, but more intensive. And then we have a school year program where it's once a month on the weekends. And so between, the 22 sanctuaries, we have either host summer or school year or both in some cases. And we just recently expanded to Canada. So we are now, we're talking with farm sanctuaries there to see if people would like to join. But there are many, many across the country. And we go through a pretty strict vetting process to make sure they are indeed aligned with our ethics and they're a good place for kids to be and, of course, animals to be. So, we've met some amazing founders and employees and volunteers at sanctuaries all over. And as you know, it's a hard job. I know you love animals, but it's a very rewarding one.
It sounds like it really is. And as you said, it's a hard job. And I've always said things like what you're talking about are the long game, right? Like you're teaching about respect for animals and people and the planet and all these other things. And that's not something that's just like, oh, well, we'll rescue this one animal. This is something that's going to the understanding, the learning, the shaping of people's minds and kids' minds for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always say we can't rescue our way out of this situation. The sanctuary world collectively says that because there's just, even the largest sanctuaries that have the most financial support and the most staff, like we're not making a dent in how many animals need help and are trapped in the system. And I think doing education at sanctuaries is one of those ways we can amplify our impact and actually help a lot more animals than we're physically able to care for. And so we knew there needed to be a program that help sanctuaries to do that, because most people are, they're knee deep in animal care and veterinary bills and fundraising, and it's so much. They don't have time to create a curriculum. And so we try to bridge that gap. And, it's a free program for sanctuaries. We actually give them a small stipend because we want them to provide plant-based lunches for the kids when they come.
Cool.
And then, of course, if they want to go above and beyond, and some of them do, they spend more money on it. But really, it's intended to be a free curriculum for sanctuaries to be able to utilize to benefit, more animals and, of course, the children and teens that come to the program.
Yeah. No, and this is something that's clearly right up your alley as an educator, right? You know how to build the curriculum, you know how to build the core competencies and the lesson plans and everything else that is needed to make this thing successful.
Yeah, thank you. I know it was a kind of a when worlds collide when I started the sanctuary, and I'd always wanted to work with animals, but was a teacher, and it does seem like a great fit for me. I always say I'm doing now what I would do if I didn't have to work, which
Okay.
I don't think, a lot of people get the chance to say, and I feel really grateful every day that this is my job.
I want you to take us back to that time because you mentioned you were an educator first, right? So maybe tell us a little bit about the levels and grades and that you taught, but then you had this idea that says, I'm gonna do this, right? I believe you had a co-founder as well, but take us back in time to when before you started this, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So I taught English. I'm an English literature major. So I taught primarily seventh graders, but always middle school. It was sixth, seventh, eighth. I had seventh graders most of the time. And I also taught a leadership class, which was the elective that I taught. We all taught one elective. And that also really helped me see just so much potential in young people that is untapped. And, I know you talk a lot about leadership on your podcast. And I think that we miss the boat on a lot of kids because we underestimate their abilities, especially the ones that are highly motivated. So yeah, I love teaching. I didn't love the politics and the parent issues, and there were some things I didn't love about it, but I loved the kids, and so I really wanted to continue doing something with students, even if I didn't teach forever. So for the sanctuary, it was founded back in 2014, and my former husband and I, who are still friends, and he's still on the board, we founded it together. So we actually bought the property. We saved up. We bought the property to do the sanctuary. And he was a teacher as well. He was teaching high school at the time. And then he also taught middle school for a number of years. He taught math. And so, yeah, we started just really, the two of us were co-founders. We started with a very skeleton team of volunteers and 6 animals. And it grew to over 80 animals in the years that we had it. Yeah, we we learned. I can't even start to tell you how much we learned. We had a phenomenal vet, a large animal vet who's still a good friend who really helped us so much at the beginning, just learn what we were doing. And of course, we only took one species at a time until we knew, how to care for them properly. Yeah. It's very grassroots, so all donation based. The sanctuary is still run primarily by people that give $20 to $25 a month. Collectively, we're able to fund, the animal care and all of that. So very, very grateful for that. And then with LEAP, so we actually started a program here just at Blackberry Creek locally a number of years ago called Keepers, which was sort of the precursor to LEAP, but it was our own students. And usually, they would just come volunteer because they needed volunteer hours once they got into high school and they wanted to find something that they enjoyed. And so they would remember volunteering at the sanctuary and come back. And then as they were here, they'd ask questions. They'd want to learn about the animals' rescue stories and learn how to help take care of them and, observe our veterinarian. And so we thought we really should make this some sort of a more formal program. And around the same time, we had a lot of students in our own classes that would want to surrender animals from the 4-H or the FFA program. And if people aren't familiar with that, that's Future Farmers of America is FFA. 4-H is very similar. But one of the things that they do is raise a baby animal. Little kids usually start with chickens or bunnies, all the way up to, high school students are raising pigs and cows and sheep and goats. And they do a phenomenal job teaching them leadership and responsibility and all of those things. But then, of course, the end game is that they have to auction their animal to slaughter at the end.
Hmm.
And these kids are, so many of them, especially in the beginning before they're kind of indoctrinated into this system of like, this is just what you do. They don't want to take that final step. They have taken amazing care of their animals. Like, they are very responsible. They've created that bond. And so we would work with students. We had one student named Adori who saved a pig named Sebastian, who's still here. And there's a little YouTube video called Adori's Courage that is her story of saving Sebastian. But, we would finish with these kids and think, well, there's nowhere else for them to go next year where they can still work with animals if they don't want to participate in the, the end game. And that was sort of mind-blowing to us as teachers. Like, we have so many compassionate students across the country, and these programs are really squashing that. And also, sanctuaries are at capacity. Like, there's no way we could save hundreds of animals every year and then have the kids go back into these programs. And so we partnered with 2 other sanctuaries, Rancho Compasión, which is in Northern California. Well, they're all in Northern California, but that one's down north of San Francisco. And then Jameson Humane, which is in Napa. And the 3 of us came together to start this idea of what if we sort of essentially took the program at Blackberry, reinvented it, made it more of a formal curriculum, and outsourced it for free to sanctuaries across the country so that we could amplify that impact. So sanctuaries, like I said, would have, something easy to utilize for their curriculum. And so more students who wanted to work with animals could do that in a way that aligned more with their ethics and values. So that's essentially the origin story of LEAP. That was back in 2022. We officially made LEAP its own nonprofit. Yeah, and around this, a little bit before that, I left teaching to do animal work full time. So I am now in charge of making sure, this program is what students want it to be. We have a youth advisory council where we have 7 high school and college students that help us make sure it is not corny, that it's fun, that they're doing things that high school students would find engaging and appealing and cool, and basically make them want to show up on their weekends because they're signing up for this. They already have a billion things going on. And so we want to really make sure it's very fulfilling for them and that they're still learning what we're trying to teach them. So
I just want to know how you get them to put their phones away to actually participate hands-on for a while.
You know what? I have had 0 problems with that. It's funny, like, I understand that concern being a teacher, that was always a concern in the classroom. But I think for the students that apply for LEAP, they are so highly motivated to do this work. And I think for so many of us, adults included, like, it's just more of a habit being on our phones.
Yeah.
And so, in a classroom, there's boredom. We always say kids' attention span lines up, humans' attention span lines up to their age. So even adults. So, if you have a 16-year-old, you basically have 16 minutes of their complete focused attention before you start losing them. Same with adults. If you're 30, after 30 minutes, you're still there, but you're kind of like starting to wander. And so we really try to make our classroom portion no more than an hour to an hour and a half with some breaks. And then everything else is hands-on. So the phones haven't been an issue. We actually just used them last weekend to make advocacy videos for wildlife. Cool. So also teaching them how to utilize that technology for good is part of the program.
Yeah. Now, how do you measure the impact? I mean, you mentioned there's a couple of dozen organizations now that are using the curriculum in that. How do you measure the impact?
That's a really good question, and one we are still modifying every year. So the main way we do it as far as hard data is surveys. So before the students start, we have them take a kind of a beginning of the year, like a first day survey. And we ask them things like, how familiar are they with some of these concepts, just to kind of get an idea where we're going to start. But then we also ask them about their lifestyle, like their leadership, their relationship with animals in the natural world, like how much they enjoy being in nature, what they want to do for careers, all of those things. And then at the end of the year, we give them a similar survey to see growth in those areas. And also for us to be able to assess, did they want something different? Did you feel like there was enough time on this topic? Was there another topic you'd like? So, for example, I do teach it at my own sanctuary. So I have a group of 11 students this year, all high schoolers who are my LEAP kids here at Blackberry. And I think 5 out of the 11 want to be veterinarians. And so, yeah, which is very cool. But, one thing they've told me all year is like, we want all this hands-on vet stuff. And We do some of that, but that's also hard because I have to have a vet come, right? And like
Super nice.
spend their week, it's always on weekends, spend their weekend. And so what we decided to do at Blackberry is, okay, since I have all these interested kids, they're going to finish the normal LEAP curriculum so they get every concept that the rest of the country does. And then my sanctuary specifically, we're going to offer a veterinary camp this summer where it's a 1 week long day camp where these kids or anybody, but the LEAP students can then come to our summer camp, and we have a different vet scheduled every day to talk about and do hands-on different things with the animals. So it also gives us a chance to get that like real-time feedback of, we're surveying you and how much you learned, but also our own organization, and are we catering to what you need and trying to prepare you for your future. So we're doing our best to get kind of constant feedback from them.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Thank you.
How do you weave leadership into this? I mean, I'm because you've mentioned it a number of times. Obviously, you taught classes back in your, education days on leadership. How
Yeah.
do you weave this into this experience?
Well, I think it starts first with our social emotional learning. So the very first day, we talk about qualities that leaders have that they want to develop. And some of those are practical, like, you know, being on time and being responsible. But a lot of them are social emotional, like having empathy for others, and acting when there's a problem and being a little bit more generous with our time or our money or, all of those things. And so they develop on their own a list of qualities and leadership skills they want to either learn more about or develop in themselves more through the year, which makes it a little more customizable for all the sanctuaries. So the kids are actually more invested because they are asking to learn more about these things. And then we're able to easily tie those in because all of those topics tie in with anything related to, climate or nature or the animals that we're caring for. And so, for example, I mentioned the workshop we just did last weekend with their phones and the advocacy videos. So we've been learning about wildlife conservation, keystone species, invasive species, things like that, having some ethical dilemma debates. And their task now was to choose an animal that they're tracking. They have a bracelet from the Follow Company, which is a wildlife group that tracks different animal species for science and for nonprofit data. And so they had to do a video explaining the threats that those animals face in the wild and how humans can help, a regular person like you and I, we're not a biologist, we have a day job, how can we get involved? And that's essentially teaching them the leadership skill of, I learned something, I care about this, and now I'm going to advocate in a way that's accessible to other people and sort of be, a mini expert on this topic. And so we do things like that, and we try every session to incorporate at least one of their leadership skills they want to work on into the curriculum.
I think that's really super cool. And I love how you're challenging them to take the leadership, right? And pick an animal and then develop this. I mean, you're really making them step out of their comfort zone.
Thanks. Yeah, it's scaffolded for sure. We certainly have students who come in who are in drama and they love public speaking and
Sure.
they're happy to be on camera. And for the ones that are a little more shy to kind of develop that skill, we talk about there's plenty of impactful social media videos where you're not seeing the person talk, right? They're doing a voiceover and they're doing captivating video of the animal or like a nature documentary. And so we talk about, even though maybe public speaking isn't your strong suit, how can you still be a leader with the strengths that you do have, which has resonated well, I think, with students who find themselves, with different learning styles and different strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. How has the curriculum evolved? I mean, you mentioned you started out with high school and now you're all the way down to fourth grade. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of work to do in such a short
Yeah.
time.
Well, I have a wonderful colleague, Andrea, who was also a teacher and also specialized in curriculum. So the two of us have done a lot of it. Well, we've done pretty much all of it together. We do get, like I said, input from the students on our youth advisory council in case there's things they want to learn about. And also the sanctuary teachers, one of them wanted a plant-based nutrition lesson last year because we do plant-based cooking classes to obviously explain how to, put into practice this compassion that they're learning for animals. And so, yeah, it's been a gradual process of developing the curriculum. It's always changing because we try to keep up with current events. There's lots going on, with legislation for animals all the time and things change. So some of those things change a little bit, but the core content, we started with high school simply for practical reasons because they could drive. The high schoolers can drive themselves to
Sure.
sanctuaries. And a lot of times the sanctuaries, more often than not, are pretty far away
Yeah.
from, I mean, they're in rural areas. And now we're expanding it. We started Leap, we call it Leap Kids. We started Leap Kids with the 6th through 8th graders, and then modified it just a little bit to be able to go to 4th and 5th. And so that's kind of where we are right now. We do have some units that we teach to kindergarten through 3rd graders. For example, Critter Creek, where you are in Florida, they're teaching over 90 students at an after school program. It's similar to a Boys and Girls Club, but they go once a month after school and present to kindergarten through 3rd graders. And we're able to customize that based on, what they want to teach them. And then the kids are going to go have a field trip to their sanctuary. So it allows us to reach more students that way by being flexible with the curriculum.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it sounds like you've learned and adapted, as you're going, and you continue to learn and adapt.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's a process that will ever end. But, as you remember from being in school, I'm sure, I think things change, curriculums change. And I think that the teachers who are the most engaging are the ones that keep up with that and try to connect it to the kids' everyday lives. So that's
Yeah.
what we're doing our best to do.
I'm curious. I mean, if you had a time machine and you could go back in time, what advice would you give your younger self about doing this?
It's a great question too. You have so many good ones. Sometimes I wish I would have started it earlier because I did spend 10 years teaching and I just love animals so much. And I didn't do that for like all of my 20s. But at the same time, looking back, I think my teaching experience was invaluable now with what I'm doing. So it's hard to say I would have done anything differently. I think what I would tell a lot of people want to start sanctuaries, they want to start their own farm sanctuary. And I think if I could give myself advice about that, I love what I do, but I think it has to be your life's calling. Like it has to absolutely be a 24/7 thing you want to do. It's an incredible amount of time and money and effort. And a lot of people burn out or don't have the money or help that they need. And then the animals suffer because of that. We've seen time and time again, sanctuaries have to close down, or other sanctuaries very generously have to try to absorb their animals, which is also extremely challenging. And so I think, what I tell people now that come here and they're like, oh, I want to do this, I want to start a sanctuary. It's like, go volunteer at one first and get really involved, maybe serve on the board, see the ins and outs. Because if you really do want to do it, we have another sanctuary who here in Sacramento, Only Sunshine, they came here years ago and I was like, volunteer first. And they did. And they started a very effective small sanctuary. But there's others that, they're like, oh, yeah, I didn't realize the level of commitment. And so I think we always at LEAP, we always need volunteers at the sanctuaries to help implement our program. If there's one of us and there's 11 kids, we need someone to pick up lunch. We need someone to help supervise. We need all these helpers. And so sometimes I think it would be just really helpful for people to know that they can help in that capacity.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I love that. I mean, I love that. I say the same thing in the companion animal world, that go volunteer at a shelter, at a rescue before you start your own rescue and
Mhm.
really understand what goes into this, because not everybody's cut out for it. Being a founder, being the top dog is not always what it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, especially in sanctuary work, I think something people like, they know it's hard work. They know it's, you don't make money. They know all those things, but I think a lot of people don't know the emotional toll because you take in a lot of animals that are sick, a lot of animals that are orphaned, a lot of animals that don't make it,
Yeah.
and you have to be very comfortable with death being sort of a constant companion in your life. And in many ways, I have found that to be a really cool experience because it has just given me a different perspective on how short life really is, and just to really, be present as much as possible with the animals here and also just with, people in my life. But a lot of people find themselves sort of emotionally burned out. And then, of course, that's not fun for anybody, for them or the animals in their care. So it is challenging, but therapy's good. I have a vegan therapist
That's
who
right.
understands why I cry, when I lose a pig or a sheep or a goat, and I think like-minded friends and people in the industry. I have another friend named Troy who just started a little organization. He's been a therapist for years, and he started a supporting vegans group to help people kind of cope with the constant cruelty that we see, because we see the worst of the worst, in society. And yeah, there's lots of people doing really cool things to support others. So
Nice. I love that. Well, Danielle, as we start to come to the end of the show, I always like to wrap up with a lightning round where we just ask some really easy questions, learn a little bit about you as a person,
Okay.
and it's nice, easy stuff. So my first question: are you an early bird or a late night owl?
I'm a late night owl.
Really? And I was going to say early bird. I figured you were up early taking care of the animals, but
No, the animals are on my schedule. So
okay, I
they,
love that.
I mean, it changes with the season. So in the
Okay,
summer, I do feed them earlier because it's hot and you don't want
sure.
animals in barns or, coops when the sun's out already blazing. But no, I mean, I actually find I work my best in the evening, and I think it's because there's fewer interruptions.
Sure.
I feel like once, not from just people, needing emails and things, but from the animals, like everybody's in bed, everybody's safe. And then I have a few hours to really work and focus. So,
Nice.
but I've kind of always been that way since childhood.
I'm sure you're gonna have multiple answers to this next one, but
Okay.
what is the most unexecutive thing you did this week? What
Oh,
feeding, cleaning
unexecutive
up?
thing.
Yeah.
I cleaned out a really nasty wound yesterday. That was probably pretty gross. Yeah, one of my pigs whacked his ear on something. I don't got a good little puncture wound, and it was quite gross. So, we do the gross stuff too. I muck
Sure.
poop. That's also pretty
Yeah, you're the
pretty
chef the daily
executive.
task.
I do find though that being out with the animals every day just keeps me really grounded and also reminds me why I'm doing the other work.
Yeah. What do you like to do to decompress after a hard day?
I love reading. You and I talked about audiobooks briefly before this call. So I drive a lot for work, going around to different sanctuaries and
Sure.
different places. I do love reading. I also really love wildlife travel, which is something I do more in my free time when I actually take time off from the sanctuary. So I've met an incredible group of friends, like-minded people, who we go with an organization called the SOSA, the Save Our Species Alliance, and we just got back from Maldives, and we were working with, with a shark biologist, learning all about the issues that sharks are facing. And so, that is how I love to relax, is to travel and hang out with friends who are like-minded. But at the same time, I always come home learning more about, what I can implement in my job. So that's probably my second favorite, that and a good book.
I like that. And my last question for you is, what do you want your legacy to be?
I think, they always say, this is going to sound super corny, but they always say you want people to remember not what you did for them, but how they made you feel. And I think that would be for the humans in my life what I would like. I think on a larger scale, I would like to make at least a small indent in the way that we treat non-human animals as a society, and to normalize anti-speciesism. So, the reason that we treat a pig differently than we do a dog is just because of how our culture is and how we are raised to think of them. And I can give you, time and time again examples of that, and different cultures see animals differently. But yeah, if I could make a small dent in that, I think that would be a life well lived and just ease suffering for others.
I think you've already made a huge impact on that. So I think you're well on your way to that. And I just want to say thank you, Danielle, for coming on the show. Thank you for everything you do. And I really just love the mission of getting the next generation to understand the importance of these sentient beings in our lives. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.